Welcome to Mental and Emotional Health. We began this series on rape. In the first part, we try to understand what is rape, which is sexual violence or assault, and then the causes of sexual assault. In this second part, we're going to be looking at the consequences, the various consequences of rape. I want to give an example with a practical situation, that I handled. This young girl was about 8 or 9, and she actually lived abroad with her mother. And the mother used to go to work and then leave her with some of her friends. And the girl suddenly went into depression and was terribly withdrawn, couldn't attend to her academics any longer. They tried medical attention. Finally, they brought her back to Nigeria. Finally, she ended up in my office. And I just wanted to test out something out. I asked her father to ask this girl to embrace her father. And this girl could not embrace her father. In fact, when the father came near, she put her hand on her chest to prevent the father from embracing her. I mean, it confirmed something to me that this young girl had been undergoing, sexual assault. She has undergone sexual assault. I mean, okay, so you can imagine, a young girl of about 8, 9, not being able to relate well with her own father, her biological father, her real father, who happened to be in Nigeria here then. So rape has a lot of consequences. Right? I'm already talking about one aspect of that consequence, which is relationship consequence. People who suffer rape find it difficult to relate with others. They are suspicious, they are withdrawn, they prefer to just stay on their own. Relationship, if you get into a relation with such people, they can't fully open up to you. They are struggling within, and they may not even tell you what they're going through. That's just one aspect. Now, the second aspect that is very clear, everybody knows, is the physical effects of rape. The physical effects like wounds. You see the person have wounds from beating, from hitting, from forceful handling, bodily pains, sometimes, bone fracture, weakness of the body. These are some of the physical consequences you can see of rape. Now, such people, complaining of pain, sometimes the bruises. These are some of the physical consequences of rape. Now let's go to another area of, consequence of rape, physiological and medical consequences. This include, cases like sexually transmitted diseases such as HIV, AIDS, herpes, gonorrhea, cases of other communicable diseases, and infections, whatever the person who was involved in rape was carrying, it may likely transfer it to the victim, who can refer to as the predator, the rapist. Whatever communicable disease is carried, right, it's likely to transfer it to the victim, to the rape victim. Most of the rape victims, of course, are women. So some of the physiological and medical consequences include vaginal and anal bleeding, because of forceful sexual relationship. Infections like vaginitis, it can result to vaginitis. It can result to chronic pelvic pain. Rape can even result into pregnancy. You can imagine a young girl who's going to school or who's, trying to find herself in her career and then experiences that and then becomes pregnant, something she didn't plan for. This was, likely to change, the line of her career and the time wasted. And it's not just the physiological, we'll come to that, the psychological consequences too. Now, see, part of physiological and medical consequences include sexual disorders. Like for a woman, the woman may suffer vaginismus. Vaginismus is a kind of a sexual disorder that occurs to women, difficulty with vaginal penetration. The woman can also suffer what we call dyspareunia, which is painful sex. Just the idea. And that may hinder, when the person gets married, may hinder normal sexual relationship, which will affect the issue of pregnancy, being able to be pregnant, nurse a baby, and all that. Now, from physiological medical consequences, we go to social consequences. The social consequences of rape include stigmatization, where people refuse to change their mind the way they see that a victim of rape. Some people even think that the person orchestrated it. In fact, that the person planned it, the person wanted it, the person is a woman of easy virtue, regarded as a second-class person. Social consequences also include cyberbullying. The people see that person in any social media, they begin to say negative things and attack that person. Includes loss of privacy. The person is no longer herself. Anywhere people see her, they want to say some things about her or behave in an annoying way towards that person. It includes victim blaming, harsh judgment against the person. You can see all these are negative, and that's actually what heightens and causes so much problem for the rape victim. As I get into the psychological consequences, you see that they are really huge and heavy and very traumatizing for the rape victim. Now let's look at the psychological consequences of rape. We've looked at the physical, we've looked at the relational, I've mentioned the social and the physiological. Now let's look at the psychological consequences of rape. This includes mood swings. Person is happy now. In a few moments time, he remembers that issue, and then you see the person becomes going to sorrow and grief. It includes emotional numbness. Just feel numb, no feeling. Includes shock. It's a shock to recover from that shock. It includes fear, phobia. You may see that the victim will not like to go out again. The victim may not like to enter a vehicle again. The victim may not like to go to school again. Anywhere you feel is exposed, or he doesn't want to get there any longer. Psychological consequences include shame, a sense of shame, a very deep sense of shame and embarrassment. People may be looking at something else and the person will be thinking they're looking at her. It includes guilt and self-condemnation. It includes depression, isolation, recurrent dreams and nightmares. Person who can suddenly wake up in the night and just remember what happened again, and it could be very terrible. And that can lead to what we call somnambulism, sleepwalking. This is becoming more terrible and more serious. Feelings of inferiority complex, and of course, that may lead to what we call suicidal ideation, or even actually attempt at committing suicide. That's why rape victims need to be properly taken care of. And of course, rape is a traumatic experience. It leads to a major psychological disorder we call post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. It's a very traumatic experience, and every victim needs a lot of care, a lot of professional care, instead of the condemnation and misunderstanding they receive from the society. Psychological consequences include also denial. At a certain stage, the person may just be thinking, "Oh, this thing, how will this never happen? Oh, this thing never happened." But it really happened. Some people get into self-mutilation. They try to wound themselves more, and in the process, the target is to erase that idea from their mind or from their body. Some of them who have suffered physical wounds, who are carrying physical wounds, but there was a sense of living, a sense of worklessness, uselessness, sense of hopelessness, and that's, of course, leads to depression, isolation. I just want to be left alone in my own world, lack of appetite, life of that feeling of worthlessness, being useless in a world. And some people, even when you try to show them love, they may not open up. So we can see the consequences are very heavy. If people are enlightened and educated about this, it will help us to both the family, individuals, NGOs, the hospital, the schools, the religious organizations, and the government, to help us, to fashion out the best way to handle victims of rape. They need our sympathy, beyond sympathy, they need our empathy, and we do something practical to help out all of us in various levels of authority, in the family, level of authority, in the organization, in the society, in the community, in the workplace, in religious places, need to show concern to victims of rape and see how we can help to ameliorate or actually erase this from our society. A lot of people are suffering silently, and if you are among them, this is a time actually to look for help, open up to the right authorities that will help you to get out of it, because as we see, the consequences are huge, and sometimes they are long lasting. Particularly the psychological ones can be long lasting, and some people really need help: emotional healing, inner healing, mental healing, emotional healing, psychological healing. And in the next part of this series on rape, we'll be discussing another type of rape. The types of rape. We'll be talking about pedophilia. Pedophilia has to do with rape of minors, people who are, less than 18. Some of them as young as 3, 4. Who have undergone this horror of rape. So in the next edition, we'll be looking at pedophilia. Keep watching. See you again.